Welcome to the Future of Wellness, exploring self-transformation and holistic healing to unlock your inner potential. Hosted by Christabel Armston and Keith Parker.
Hello, and welcome to this episode. Today we're joined by Dr. Laura Petkunaite, a dedicated educator and practitioner specializing in quantum wellness and frequency-informed methodologies. She holds a PhD in natural medicine and academic degrees across holistic health sciences, psychology, natural health education, and related disciplines. Drawing on this extensive academic background, Laura offers informational assessments designed to illuminate energetic and biophysical patterns within the body. Her approach focuses on providing insights and education that empower individuals to better understand their unique energetic profiles and explore personal wellness from a holistic perspective. Her work integrates principles from multiple disciplines to support awareness and balance, emphasizing empowerment and informed choice rather than diagnosis or treatment. As a passionate educator, she's committed to lifelong learning and sharing complex concepts in an accessible, engaging way. Dr. Laura, it is wonderful to have you with us today.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here.
Given your academic background and the PhD in natural medicine, is there a single starting point that helps to pull everything together, like a gravitational center to why you've gone down this particular path?
Oh, yes. Everything started in the medical school. I started in full Western medicine education, and I was so passionate about it. There was a time in my life where I thought, only chemical drugs and surgeries, that's the only path for health and healing. And life happened. I got extremely sick in a lot of systems actually in my body, and nothing from the Western medicine standpoint was able to help me. Then I dove into the Eastern medicine. And then I thought that I know a lot because I thought that, oh, I know Western and Eastern, like now I can blend it. Then I studied psychology in the Institute in London. And then I thought, like, oh, now I know a lot. Like now I can bridge the psychology together. And when I started diving into the physics, into the quantum physics of the human nature, I'm like, oh, I know nothing at all. And this is where I think I was able to actually start helping people. And then I'm like, okay, I have to understand the natural medicine standpoint. So at this point, I have 7 degrees. I have 3 bachelor's, 2 master's, doctorate, and PhD. So I'm combine all these different modalities and techniques in order to actually see what's happening in the human system. But my own experience was, it was the starting point.
I want to jump right in with a phrase just to help clarify things for our listeners. You mentioned quantum wellness. What exactly is quantum wellness? And then we can return perhaps a little bit to your education and story to help, piece the two together.
The way that I see human system, when I say level quantum or the physics level of the human system, I usually refer to very measurable aspects because I work with the body physics all the time, meaning I love to see the electrons flow. I love to see the biophotons and the actual light emission from the human system. We all hear that we are the light beings, but it's actually quite literally, right? We can actually see the magnetism and all the subtle bodies from the biophoton emission of the human system. So when I talk about the quantum level wellness, I'm actually referring to the first 3 stages of any human, any being existence. Because, in functional Western medicine, a lot of times we're focusing on the chemical side of the system, which is 4th stage of any type of disease, any type of disorder. Later, we have structural issues. So my job is to actually keep going backwards and see where it actually starts. And if you ever seen periodic table of elements, every chemical element is made from protons, electrons, neutrons. That's physics. So I love to work with the human physics and actually see what's happening on those layers before any condition is actually formed. If people have condition, I still want to take the steps back and see okay, why is your body repeating the same pattern over and over and over again? So that's the quantum, in my opinion.
This is a really fascinating place to be exploring because Christabel and I obviously focus on and specialize in energy work, more kind of classical sense of working with the human energy field from a more traditional, some might say esoteric, but we're kind of trying to bring contemporary language and scientific concepts to it. But we're not working, let's say, with measurable things as a primary reference point. And you're kind of connecting to that measurable thing. So I really appreciate you talking about those first three stages, the things that you can actually measure or see. Could you tell us about those, and what are the tools that measure these things? Biophotons, electrons, protons, etc., that you're working with.
Yes, that's a beautiful question, and I really appreciate people working in the energetic realm. And my job is almost to bridge the two touch points, right? To bridge the science and bridge the spirituality together. And you know, human system, physical body is electric. We all know that. Sometimes you touch something, you can feel it. Around any electrical system, your computer, your phone that you're using right now, there's magnetic field. EMFs are so popular nowadays, right? There is this magnetic realm around every single cell in your system. When you do the energy work, like people, a lot of times they're playing with the magnetism of the system, right? This is what Reiki fundamentally is from the science perspective. This is what energy healing is. So when we're looking into the human system, physical body, physical cell is electric. Again, we have magnetic realm, which becomes your emotional, mental, supramental, higher level bodies that you can actually manipulate with energetics, right? So there are certain tools, there are not too many tools because it's pretty difficult to get into that level of the human existence. But I use specific direct spectrum frequency analysis that I help to actually develop and discover, where we actually can measure the electron flow. Even I work with people from all over the world, and even from the DNA sample, right, the hair sample, we can actually see a biophoton emission. And the way that your system is emitting those electrons, emitting those biophotons, you can actually assess and understand from what layer, from what body the condition is actually coming from. Because a lot of times you know that if someone is sick, over time, like your body's always in communication, whether the condition started in the physical trauma, let's say, or in the mental pattern. It's just a matter of time when it's actually going to be transitioned into all the bodies of yours. So what I'm trying to do with the direct spectrum frequency analysis, we're trying to understand where the condition actually starts, whether it's the physicality, whether it's more subtle bodies, and what's actually causing that. Because, I don't like the saying the root cause. I don't think that there's ever just one root cause. There's interplay of a lot of elements in your system. And a lot of times we're opening Pandora's box, especially when we work with energetics, because you don't know if that emotional mental pattern is yours, transgenerational DNA level trauma, collective imprint that you have, or plenty of the things, like plenty of variables that can be there. And with a direct spectrum frequency analysis, we can analyze and see whether it's genetics, right? Genetic level trauma, whether it's actually your own informational overflow, whether it's collective pattern that you are dealing with. And depending on that, I make direct spectrum frequency medicine where we can actually provide the body information that it needs. Because from whatever standpoint we are looking, from the Western medicine standpoint, we have phenomenal drugs and tools. We have great supplements on the functional medicine standpoint. We have people that do amazing job in the energetics. The one question that we're all are met is how long the change is going to stay. Because we can adjust whatever we want. Like we can change the blood work in 20 minutes, but that's not going to stay. So a lot of times I'm met with this idea where it's like, how can I provide your body the information that would really get locked in your system, right? Because your system is literally copy paste fashion. Like in biology, we call it mitosis. In general, it's a copy paste of the same cell. Same cell is made from electricity and magnetism. So that's why emotional patterns, mental patterns, they're replicated too every time when you have a new cell. So you can do the energetic adjustment, right? Like you can provide the energy healing, but on the next stage of the cells, they might look exactly the same as they did before because your body just replicating the old pattern that it has locked in. It's the same with toxins, viruses, all non-cellular structures. There is a reason why in Western medicine we say that, oh, herpes virus cannot be eliminated from the system, right? Because once the virus gets locked into the cell, it's not a cellular structure. Every time when your nervous system cell is replicated, you have the same informational pattern there. In the chemistry, like on the blood work, we obviously see the transition of that. And we can definitely assess that. But again, there are not too many tools that can actually go that far into the human existence, into the human physics. Because That's an extremely, extremely complex pattern, because I know that a lot of times when people work with a frequency, they're like, oh, higher frequency, lower frequency, right? And sometimes people come like, I want to elevate my frequency. This is not how it works. Like your liver, for example, is made from 78 segments. In one segment, you have from 500 to 1500 frequencies. My job is to find which of those is off and how can I introduce that back into your system. So the next time when your liver is replicating the cell, it has that information. And that's only physical plane of the liver. If we're diving into the subtle or like subtle layers of that, the complexity goes up like progression. I hope I answered your question. That was a long answer.
You're building an incredibly rich and nuanced picture here. I'd like to try and make it a little more practical for a listener. Let's say a client walks into your space, right? And you mentioned there the hair, the biophotonic, information available in the hair. Is that what you'd start with? Would you start by sampling an area where there's a physical complaint? How do you sample when there's a psychological issue? And, right the way through what that building that intake and treatment, if you will, if that's the right word, looks like. And you mentioned this phrase of introducing the frequency back in. I'd love to hear more about how you go about that. So we're looking at, from a start to finish treatment process, I guess, from your perspective as a practitioner.
Yes, usually because I practice here in LA and I also see some international clients. But when someone walks in, like usually the consultation is for 2 hours because I love to take my sweet time. I really want to understand what's happening in the system. We always start with the now, what kind of symptoms, what kind of issues people are presenting with at the current moment. But I always love to like kind of take the steps back and see like where it actually started. Because a lot of times when people find me, trust me, no one finds me when they feel well. A lot of times when someone finds me, they already have kind of disorders on all the planes, right? They do have emotional charge, they do have mental patterns, they do have physical issues, they do have higher subtle bodies issues, right? And everything is affected. So from that intake, I really want to ask certain questions to understand where it actually started, because a lot of times the body that is the loudest, the symptom that is the loudest, a lot of times it's a compensation mechanism. We really want to see what's actually whispering, because if someone's condition starts in the mental transgenerational trauma, right? We can definitely see effect on the physical body, but it doesn't mean that this is where it started. So I have to build the questions and actually ask people the questions that would allow me to understand where did the conditions start. And this is exactly where I have to blend the Western and the quantum and the Eastern medicine, right? To see the patterns. We always want to see what system started the whole ripple effect. Because most time when people come, they look kind of like Jenga Tower, if you ever played that game, right? Where everything is so wobbly, where you know that like if I try to fix one element, everything might fall apart. So I really have to ask the questions to see where it all started. And a lot of times people cannot answer most of those questions. We have certain trauma responses, we have collective patterns. Again, transgenerational DNA level traumas. Most people don't even know that we inherit the emotional and mental fields from our ancestors, right? It's not necessarily skin color, eye color, hair structure. Like that's 2% of your DNA. 98% of your DNA is inherited field, inherited emotional, mental patterns. So, there is no amount of self-work if the condition is not starting in self. If the condition is not starting in you, like you cannot just get your way out of there. Like you have to use certain tools and other people and all the modalities in order to actually create the long lasting change. So we always start with an intake. I love to explain people what's happening in their body, why it started, how it started, like why is that the pattern that they see in their system, why they constantly need the certain medication or the certain supplementation or certain modalities that they're using. And then we go into analysis. If someone comes in person, I can definitely test them in person. We can definitely, sometimes I use acupuncture points, meridian points on your system to actually assess those electrons and biophotons. Sometimes we use the hair, the DNA, because your blood has a lot of biophotons too. Actually, your DNA and your blood are two areas that have the most of the biophotons. And when I'm looking into that assessment, it's so complex, but I have to look into the pattern that your body is emitting, right? There's a certain movement when the condition is starting from the mentality. There's a certain movement when the condition is starting in the physicality. There's a certain movement that when condition starts in more subtle energetic bodies. And depending on that, we have to see like, okay, how can we actually create something new in your body? How can we introduce something that stays? Because, in my exploration, I start seeing that every condition in our system, whether it's physical or energetic condition, all the condition starts for three main reasons: too much information, depletion of information, or hijacked information. When I say hijacked information, we're talking about the traumas, interferences, and all the energetics. When we talk about depletion of information, when someone is, for example, having liver inflammation for a long time, your kidney will be depleted. That's the energetic mother of your liver, right? So we have to understand that, well, in this case, maybe not the kidney needs treatment. Maybe the liver actually needs treatment and kidney will come back online when it actually has the informational layer prepared for that. Or whether it's too much of an information, meaning viruses, bacteria, emotional load, mental load, and all the things in between. So I create personalized medicine for people, personalized direct spectrum frequency medicine, and to the level where it's like I never made the same medicine for two people in my life. Everyone has completely different universes in their bodies, right? And my job again is to find what part of the system is affected, how it's affected, and how can I introduce back coherence in your system. I'm not working with a scalar wave that I know a lot of frequency devices are based on the scalar mechanism. We call it scalar wave for a reason. It kind of comes as a wave. Like imagine if you walk by the ocean and you have a warm wind that's going through you, right? This is the scalar wave. You feel it at the moment when it's going through you, but once you're out of that space, it doesn't have any effect on you. Some pieces in our system, they're capable to catch that frequency, but it doesn't mean that your body is going to actually have the full effect from the scalar wave. So that's why we have to go through the direct spectrum frequency principle, meaning we have to directly give the information for your liver, for your nervous system, for your DNA, or whatever plane of your existence. How can we break down certain conditions or introduce the new coherence? Because I think that a lot of time healing is not improving the condition. A lot of times healing is actually bringing back coherence in the system so everything can fall back into places.
Coherence is a wonderful word and something that presumably will be more and more emphasized in an understanding of holistic medicine, being kind of the hallmark of how information is organized efficiently. And this is really this informational medicine paradigm. And you talked about information. I'm really curious about this intersection where there's, on the one hand, information, and that presumably means we can kind of measure it because it's information. But on the other hand, there's emotion, there's belief, there's trauma, memory, there's consciousness, even, right? There's this intersection between the measurable and what we realize is not really measurable in a traditional sense. And when I'm hearing you talk about working with people, I'm hearing there be some kind of like interplay between those two domains of taking information about emotions and traumas and family history and then mapping that onto some informational system. So I'm curious about how you feel about managing this, the difference between those domains. And then if you are working fundamentally or leaning more as a question on the informational side of things, where does this map come from that goes from information to emotion and psychology? As you said, it maps onto transgenerational, it maps onto certain emotions. Where is that map coming from?
Okay. So, it almost feels like when we're working with people, I love to have a split screen in my perception, right? You have a split screen on the 3D informational level, and you have a split screen for actual metaphysical, let's call it that way, right? Like everything that it's seemingly immeasurable. When I say measurable, a lot of times that data is not measurable by level, percentage, or um, any type of like quantifiable data. The measurement, it's more the measurement of the pattern. When you measure the certain biophotonic flow emission pattern, certain pattern can show you, is it more mental, is it more emotional or physical? It's just the flow of electrons, right? It's a flow of biophotons. And this is what we're more measuring. Like it's impossible to measure emotion load, right? I know sometimes for simplicity, people say like, oh, how bad it is from 1 out of 10, right? You can try to put the number for the simplicity reasons, but those things are immeasurable. I'm more measuring and looking for the pattern than the actual quantifiable number, right? So I really I love to invite five body perspective, right? The physical, emotional, mental, supramental, the spiritual, bliss body, and all in between, right? Some of them are measurable on the actual quantifiable data. Some of them are actually more subjective data. And I think that my work is to kind of combine all of them, combine everything in between to allow people see how they actually translate into disease, into disorder, and vice versa. Because sometimes we see that someone is not physically healthy, they cannot access certain energetic realms of their existence. And when someone is energetically actually affected, they cannot have healthy physical system. So I'll give you an example. For example, if we have someone with sexual trauma has a tendency to scatter kidney and urinary bladder morphogenetic field. Morphogenetic field of those organs, imagine that as a bank where your system holds the information about the healthy cells. If that bank is scattered, your body like is constantly going to the bank asking for the information. At some point, you're going to have the answer that, hey, your credit score is way too low for us to give you anything. And this is where this is where disorders can start. So I have to see what part of every organ, of every system is actually affected so I can decide what to do with them. And this is where that bridge kind of comes online, because sometimes you see that, okay, there is a clearly scatterness of the kidney morphogenetic field. And then you ask question like, hey, have you ever had sexual trauma? And some people, whether they don't remember or they haven't had that, but there's a certain informational flow pattern from biophotons. If it's more actual sexual trauma from your grandmother, right? It's still gonna affect your system. It does not necessarily have to be in your own body, but this is how transgenerational traumas actually get patterned and translated generation after generation. So you have to constantly bridge that esoteric side, metaphysical side with actual physicality. And, I think that as a doctor, my job is to actually adapt to the level of consciousness and awareness that people have. There is no need for me to like pretend that I'm an expert and try to talk with the words that no one's going to understand, like no one from my patients. So I have to see where they are. And sometimes it means like allowing people to think that their problems are caused by herpes virus, But the next time when they come, the healthier they become, they start asking the question, but it's like, why it's actually happening in my body? And then you can introduce a little bit more energetics for them. So, and some people, they want to neglect physical body, which I also think that it's not correct. Like all the bodies, they have their own role. They're bounded by different laws and regulations, and they require different treatments, but all of them have the role and all of them are equally important. So I think the job for us is to actually create more and more awareness where people can bridge spirituality, esoterics, and the physicality and the 3D reality, because there are a lot of freeways in between those realms.
Thank you, Laura. I'm intrigued about the principle here of personal empowerment, right, for the client, for the patient, if you will. You're working with these frequency informed methodologies, right? You're looking for or offering informational assessments, seeking out patterns, signals, observing how that might inform things, right down to, from what you're describing, somewhat of a minutiae, right? Scattered energy there in the kidney bladder channels, for instance. So part of what we understand from working with clients is seeing how important it is for an insight, providing a space of presence and awareness for a client to develop an insight, right? For them to move into their own knowing, their own answers. So I'm intrigued about this subtle interplay where you're essentially applying or seeking out very specific answers through technologies, right, and awareness. I know that you've emphasized informed choice and personal empowerment rather than prescriptive outcomes, which interestingly is what we might, associate with more medical models again. So how is that distinction played out in your work? Where is space for the client to recognize or connect to diagnoses or outcomes that you might be recognizing?
It's a very beautiful question. And I think this is exactly where we have to assess every single client separately, right? There are people that are seeking diagnoses for various reasons. Some people actually need safety and understanding that they're not alone in the certain condition or certain feeling in their body. And we can acknowledge the diagnosis. And some people, they want to disconnect from that as far as they can, right? It's a full spectrum. I think we call it we say emotional spectrum for a reason. All of us land somewhere. So if you find some client that it's coming from the full, let's say, victim mentality, right? Well, you're not going to feed him the answers that going to feed the demon of the victim, right? Because the more food you give, the bigger the demon is. The bigger it is, the more food it needs. So it's actually constantly assessing on what part of the spectrum people land. And I always say to people, you should definitely check with your own internal alert system, right? And see what resonates, what doesn't. Everything that I say, you have to check with your system. If there is something that doesn't resonate or actually doesn't feel like a truth, feel free to put it in the trash can. And always I say to people, like, hold the information that you get like somewhere in your field where you can actually assess, is it for me or not? Because it's extremely difficult for every single practitioner to actually take out all the lenses of trauma and the information that you learn and the course that you take and the education, right? So I think my job is to always be in the level of awareness where I can see where people land. Because the deeper we take them, it's like you're almost taking the elevator with every single person into the patterns of their subconscious, into their deepest traumas, right? I have to make sure that I'm not getting scared with my own demons and everything that I'm going to see for myself when we're going deeper. So I really have to make sure that it's like you're constantly assessing in your mind. And obviously, part of that is intuitive process. Because over time, you learn that, hey, like everything that had to be said on during the session, it was said. Because I remember when I started working, there were times when I'm like, oh my God, I have to call for the patient and tell them something else. And I have to make sure that they heard that. And I have to make sure that they took note on that. And then after some time, you understand that there is this power where it's like everything that had to be said, it was. That's it. And if there is there is a reason why I forgot certain things to mention, or there are the reason when I didn't ask the certain questions of the client. So it's really, I think it's a constant intuitive and also, psychological assessment where people are and how can we actually guide them for their own knowing, for their own personal choice and their own assessment. But I think that for the multidimensional medicine provider, like our job is to actually provide all the possible information. And, I always say to the patient, take it and run with it. You don't have to agree with the things that I say, but I really want to give you a little different perspective because a lot of times when we don't have certain box in our mind field, we just say that it's nonsense, right? So how can we actually create enough fluidity where you can choose what is your own truth and what's not?
A brief pause to thank you for listening to this episode. If you're looking to take the next step in your transformation, find out how we can support you with our popular energy healing training, one-to-one private sessions, free resources, and more. Visit energyfielddynamics.com to learn more. There's this interesting interplay about bridging these two worlds of being in a measurable, let's say, data-backed or even pattern-backed, as you've described, which is an interesting idea that kind of does bridge things in its own way as I think about it more and more, the idea of patterns, because it's information, but it's also what carries the information maybe in a more direct way. I'm curious about application. So, for example, we work with the energy healing paradigm of running energy. So, frequencies or vibrations or processes, or just you can do a lot to make your field start moving and flowing differently from a classical energy healing standpoint. So, the application is running energy, we might say. What is the application of the kind of information medicine that you're working with? Is it the frequency device broadcasting frequencies? Is it, like, for instance, homeopathy distills the vibrational essence of particular objects in the physical world? Like, what is the application component of the information medicine you're delivering?
Yeah, it actually physically, it looks very similar to homeopathic medicine. I usually use the droppers and we want to infuse the certain direct frequencies, right? The infusion is different. It's not the homeopathic medicine because there is no fundamental organic substance, right? It's all information and it's all direct spectrum. A lot of times people say that it's like hey, so is it just distilled water, right? There is no way that you can infuse anything in distilled water if there is no trace minerals to actually hold the frequencies. There has to be the specific medium and where you can actually infuse the frequencies. And every single frequency, it might require different mediums. If you work with certain emotional patterns, let's say excess of guilt, grief, sadness, whatever it's there, that would require completely different medium than when you're actually working with Epstein-Barr virus. Or if you're working with certain mental patterns or beliefs, not enoughness coming from third generation back. Those frequencies, they would require different mediums to actually stay. And it's delivered through the mouth like it's a dropper. So it looks very similar to homeopathic medicine.
So we're talking about a kind of a customized frequency signature embedded into physical matter that is coming off of the reading, the spectrum analysis reading, and then you're doing your side of things in choosing or designing or customizing what that frequency is, and then the water, which is prepared in a particular way, is the delivery mechanism for the vibration or the information, we might say.
Yes, I really love how you actually combine it all in the simple way. Yes.
It's fascinating because, there are all these different forms of emerging medicine or therapies, and the actual, practical functional component is very interesting to both Christabel and myself because we're working with particular paradigm and particular techniques, but we also kind of collect and like to talk to different people and see what are different people doing. And this quantum medicine specifically kind of umbrella term that you're describing is something that I don't think personally I've heard about and described as such. So I appreciate you sharing the information.
There are not too many people in the world that are doing the work that I do. So it's not something that you will hear often. It requires different types of education, and especially, like in US and Europe, like you have to have certain credentials to do that. And there is a lot of education that is required to keep diving deeper and deeper and deeper into those realms. So it's fascinating, and it has no ceiling. Like the more you know, the more you don't know, and understanding that every single person is completely different canvas, right? It really requires for the practitioner, and I think for anyone who works with a subtle energy, it really kind of poses the question of like, how can I make sure that I'm as detached as possible and create as least amount of possible observer effect, right? My consciousness is not in the way.
Thank you for mentioning that, Laura. You spoke earlier about how, as practitioner, there's potentially interface, right, between your system and someone else's, which is something we address directly in the work we do when we train people. Whether we call it something as simple as mirror neurons, whether we look at sympathetic resonance, right, that interplay between practitioner, client, is really substantial and worth noting. How does that show up in your work, and how do you go about mitigating or investigating that? I'm really fascinated at this from the perspective of people having better energetic literacy, really, around their systems and what I would call energetic communication, right? This constant interplay, intentional, unintentional, between our systems as we go about our days and lives, and of course in this client and practitioner relationship also.
See, like I might try to answer this question from pretty far, but I think a lot of times people try to navigate that from the physical body perspective, right? We know that we feel the empathic feeling, we feel all in our physical body. But at the same time, we have to understand that in the physical body, there are not too many feelings that we can feel. We all can have bloating, right? My bloating might be coming because I'm not releasing my overthinking patterns. Some other person bloating can actually be coming from low-grade Epstein-Barr virus, for someone else transgenerational trauma, from someone else like they actually ate something that their system doesn't like at all, for someone else because they're going to have a conversation tonight that they're not looking forward to, right? Any peak of the symptom have millions of the entry points. And a lot of times I think that we don't have actually kind of redefine alert systems to actually understand like what's pinging in my body, what's causing that peak of anxiety, something that happened 5 years ago on this day, or something that will happen 2 years from now on this day, right? Your body is not time and space bounded. So it's really understanding that like if we use only physical body's perception, we can we can leave a lot of space for bias, right? Because again, that we don't have too many feelings, too many symptoms in the physical body to know. But I think that redefined alert system means that you know how to read certain energetic signatures. You almost like know the taste, right? Because at some point you can know the taste when certain DNA points getting activated, or if it's actually stemming from some timeline confusion, let's say. Like there are different signatures, there are different patterns that your body can show you, but it really requires some work and some self-awareness around it in order to actually navigate that, because we are electromagnetic beings. Like there is a reason when you go to therapy, usually therapist sits this far from you, right? Like there is the reason we constantly interact electromagnetically. And if you're a smart CEO, like yes, of course you want all your employees to sit pretty close in the office, because they will start sharing the same mental field, aka work for the same goal. So it's actually knowing like how stable, how contained my field is. And any traumatic response, a lot of people are fragmented. Their psyche leaves parts of the fragments in time and space, and we don't have contained energetic boundary then. So I think that it's all coming back to the wholeness. The more healthy you are, multidimensionally healthy you are, the more whole you are, the more your field is contained. The more contained field you have, the more you know how to read the signatures that are interplaying with you. Because it's really like, as they always say, it all starts in you. It's like you have to be pretty healthy, again, like on all the energetic realms, on the subtle bodies, in order to be contained, in order to be protected from the energetics around. And I think that a lot of times people miss the behavioral consent component. A lot of times people think in energetics that it's enough not to give consent for something, right? Not to give consent for any other energy to come into your field. And I wish it would be this simple, but there is behavioral consent, meaning if I go to the shopping mall, like no one's going to ask me what kind of music I want to listen at that moment. It's like if they're playing Mariah Carey, All I Want for Christmas Is You right now, like this is when I'm going to listen. And it's like in the energetic spaces, like it's the same. When you enter certain setups, your body can get affected by it. So I think it really requires healthy system and quite a lot of containment. And mainly we see that it's the psyche element. The healthier emotional and mental bodies are, the more contained the system are and the more energetically clean we are.
What does a healthy system look like to you? How does it read? And of course, I know there's a lot of nuance to that question. So I'll just pitch it as a broad umbrella.
A controversial question.
Yeah.
It's really, a lot of times people think that being healthy means not having any symptoms. I think the easiest example is like to kind of compare health and healing to investment world, financial world. When you start investing, a lot of times there is a huge volatility, right? The amplitude is so high. You're constantly collapsing into things. Over time, we all know that it's just going for the better. The amplitude is not that high, but there is still some movement. So I think healthy system is not collapsing in the system, is not collapsing in the emotion. Doesn't mean that you're not feeling emotion. You do feel emotion, you do catch your mental pattern, but you're not fully collapsing into that and drowning into that. Again, the amplitude gets shorter. Healthy system means like I know how to actually interact with a movement, energetic, physical, emotional, mental, all types of movement and interactions and fluidity in my system. So I don't have to collapse or dive into the symptom for a long time. It doesn't mean like when you're healthy that you're not going to ever experience anything unpleasant in your body. It's life. We're constantly in interaction with the whole existence. But I think that the amplitude is not as high and the volatility is not that high. And again, there is no collapse element when your system is actually healthy. It's natural. Like sometimes people say that I never want to feel anxiety. Well, you have to have anxiety. It's a natural peak of emotion when your system is literally sending you the signal that something is off in the environment. But the question is like, how long do I stay in the certain emotion? How long do I stay in the certain mental pattern? And how quickly I can just pull myself out of there. This is what I think the healthy system is. First of all, awareness, right? Awareness obviously is not equal to change. Sometimes like we notice that like, oh, now I'm aware of certain patterns, but it doesn't mean that they're going to change. But then actual awareness combined with a integral multidimensional work, like that creates a healthy system. I think by design, like we all have rights, obviously, to have that. And we also have to measure ability and willingness to do the work to get there. And I think to separate ability and willingness, these are very important patterns.
As this kind of map becomes clearer in talking about quantum, or I'm really leaning into information medicine. And I've heard that term going back now 15 years or so in various ways. I'm sure the term is older. In many ways, we are talking about information medicine from a particular vantage point. And the way you're describing how someone's system looks in a healthy way, it kind of reminds me, to use a computer ideas, we're almost like trying to be information processors. So the idea of collecting the data, interacting with the data, and then being able to process or metabolize the data becomes what we call health, so that we don't get stuck kind of cycling through particular information over and over again in a way that doesn't serve the system, that creates a collapse, creates a disorganization, that creates a blockage.
We have to see that physical body physicality is bounded by different laws, right? Energetically, mentally, and emotionally, we can be literally anywhere in the world at any given moment. We can be in Fiji Islands. Physically, to get there, you have to go to the airport, catch the flight, actually have to fly there, right? Physical body is always in delay. In physics, we call physicalities delay. And there's only as much as you can process at any given moment. So if you're doing a lot of in unseen in those subtle realms, yeah, physical body metabolization and like all these detox pathways, energetic detox pathways, they can get clogged. And then the physical body runs even slower. So every time when we see something in the physicality, like most likely energetically, you already been there, done that. It's just a pattern that actually catched you in the physicality. Because a lot, like, yes, we do have emotional, intuitive abilities to feel it in our physical body right away. But a lot of times conditions are actually coming from that inability to metabolize certain energetic patterns.
What do you see as the big block or a significant thing that you imagine could be advanced in our general understanding that would help to move forward this kind of paradigm that we're talking about? Because we are talking about a different paradigm of not only medicine, of course, but the multidimensional paradigm of what a human is from a broader vantage point.
Yes, I think it's really important for us, again, to use that measurement, right? And see like who we sharing the information with, right? Who's interested in that type of information. I think that, we always joking that every day, like you have to ask yourself a question like, am I actually still here? And I'm actually creating something that's still beneficial for the 3D reality. It's a constant dance. So I think it requires for us to actually assess who we have in conversation with and how far we're going to take those people in that multidimensional reality standpoint. Because some people, again, physically, they cannot metabolize that information. And also, we see that it's like a lot of times with that deeper information, like there's depreciation of the value that it's happening too. As we see with, let's say, yoga, right? Like every other studio in Los Angeles is yoga studio, that it's very, very far from fundamental yoga. So it's really trying to see how can we actually bring people the ideas that they can actually resonate with, so they can actually find in their body, in their system, the resonance point with it. And there is no fundamental truth, I think. Like whatever is your own truth, right? My job is to actually make sure that people have access if they want to do the multidimensional healing. Not everyone not everyone should have to do that.
How are we discerning and responsible about this work, right? There's Keith was mentioning there a paradigm shift. This is really at the cutting edge, right, of what's being discussed, what's possible, what's even measurable, right? What's substantiated by metrics, etc. So how do we help an audience stay grounded and discerning as they explore these deep concepts, right? There's a lot of jargon out there, a lot of hype, a lot of unrealistic claims. Dare I say it, even a lot of work that might not be so effective, right? That's claiming to be operating in these realms. So what are the critiques of this work? What are the limitations? How do we help really engender responsible conversation and dialogue and practice in this realm?
I think we start bumping into very, very philosophical questions, right? Where it's like how much we can actually help each other, right? How much we can actually override someone else's path. Because if we dive very, very deep in that, like then it's like What is even the profession to be a healer or a doctor, right? Can we actually influence someone if it's not for their agenda, right? On their actual lifetime. So it's really, I think it's important for people to know that as beneficial some modalities are, equally they can give you zero effect. And this is the time of our lifetime where it's extremely important for us to stay as human as possible, especially with AI emerging and all the technologies and everything coming online. You have to use that intuitive knowing what's actually for you, because you can find information about more things that you should find on the internet nowadays. So it is intuitive process, in my opinion. And people have to use that to see what practitioner, what modality can actually take me there. I see healing as like a keyhole and a key. A lot of times you're not going to need just one modality, just one adjustment, and you're healthy for life. You need your specific unlock code, right? Like specific constellation that are going to allow you to open the certain patterns. There are limitations in everything, but I think the biggest limitation is our human mind. That's most of the time is in the way.
I don't know how often I'm going to be able to avoid an AI question with anybody we talk to for the next 10 years. Like, how is that possible? But given given the idea of information medicine and assessment and the rapid development of AI and just using it, seeing and extrapolating the vastness of what this tool is and will be in particular, specifically through the lens of the idea of information, AI is going to make information and information processing at that raw data level at levels and scales that we've never experienced before at all. Do you see AI as an ally in the kind of medicine that you're doing? Or what are the pitfalls of AI when bringing it into an information and consciousness paradigm?
You know, it's such a controversial discussion, right? And everything that I'm saying now is just depending on my current knowledge, right? Meaning it can change tomorrow, it can change tonight. So the way that I see AI and all this movement right now, I can see how it can be beneficial for people to synthesize the information. But we have to keep in mind that it is artificial. It is artificial consciousness. There is a difference between artificial and organic things, right? No, it doesn't mean that you eat like non-organic food and you're going to get sick. Absolutely not. But make sure that you are not feeding yourself non-organic and toxic things all the time, because it does have a cumulative effect. I can definitely see AI being really beneficial to synthesize the information, to load the raw data and actually look for patterns, count the algorithm, like help in that realm. But I think that in any type of healing, like needs other humans. It's like, I think that this is again the time when it's extremely important to stay in the connection and the actual electromagnetic connection with other human being. AI will feed whatever prompt you give it. Like whatever you ask, like it's just gonna build on that. And a lot of times it's difficult to ask the right questions about ourselves. So if you don't ask the right questions, like you're not gonna have the right answer. You're not gonna have the right information. You're gonna have the information that's gonna feed your mental pattern, but it does not necessarily mean that it's gonna be the most beneficial thing for you. It's like, I have a golden retriever. Like when he was a puppy, he didn't need much food. The more food I give him, the bigger he got. The bigger he got, the more food he needs, right? So it's the same with the mental patterns. The more you feed it, the bigger they get. The bigger they get, well, the more they need from you. And a lot of times we see that like in the healing process, like unfortunately, sometimes we see that with the therapy too, with a lot of mental healing modalities, with a lot of emotional level modalities, where it's like we feeding the same pattern. And the more you feed it, like the more powerful the pattern gets. So I think AI is a very thin line of actual healing and actual feeding the patterns that we just want to feed subconsciously. It requires pretty, again, redefined alert system to know what part of me it's actually pinging.
How do you see quantum informed education and the work that you're doing and the field that you're in evolving over the next decade, Laura? And especially as more people are hopefully seeking meaning, as you said, more of this human to human, moving beyond the strictly materialist mode.
I do have a dream to see more and more people becoming aware of the multidimensionality. But at the same time, I understand that we might be going against the whole collective, right? So I think the work here and the idea, the way that I see life in the next decade is I do think that we're going to have more and more people that are aware. I do think that we're going to have more and more practitioners that we can work on actual realm that we are talking about. But I cannot see that being mainstream yet. And I don't know if it has to be.
As we're coming full circle here and to a close, we started with your personal journey. I'm curious, fast forward to now, what do you find yourself working on in yourself? You said you started with some health challenges and you kind of pinged from place to place to try and find answers, and that kind of fueled your journey. So what are you working with now? What's relevant for you in your own kind of practice?
Yeah, at first I used to think that, oh, all these people, all these patients are coming with random issues. And then I'm start seeing like, oh, this is how the physics works, right? Like whatever I see in my clients usually is something that requires me to look in myself and vice versa. So now I can be proactive, right? When I start seeing the certain pattern in my patients, I'm like, oh, that's exactly where I should look in myself. So it's really interesting. It feels like the most relevant, the most kind of common thing right now. It's actually people that are becoming aware of transgenerational traumas, DNA level traumas, inherited traumas, and how they're co-creating and participating in our field dynamics. And our field is based on democracy. Whatever majority is voting for, like this is where your field is going to go to. And I think that right now what's the most loud is to actually understanding what is my field made of. Like what are all these, I shouldn't say all the things that I can be aware of at certain moment, right? Patterns that are actually participating in the co-creation of reality. So I think right now what we're navigating is actually looking, okay, what's participating, what's voting for your actions, what part of you, on what level, plane and dimension of you, we actually need to look into that. And it's an exploration every single day. There is no ceiling. It's like, healing is like climbing to the Mount Everest. Like you're not going to climb just all the time. There will be the campsites, like you're going to stand, like you're going to rest for a little bit, and then you're back on the journey. And there is no ceiling in this journey, especially in the self-exploration.
Really appreciate that question. The simplicity of it. What is my field made of? It's a mirror very much to the work that we do, and from what you've shared, the work that you're offering as well. Speaking of which, please do share. We'd love to leave a space for you after such a dynamic conversation to share what your current offerings are, your service work in the world currently.
Yeah, thank you so much. I do have a space here in Los Angeles, like in West Side Los Angeles, where I see patients in person. And I do work with chronic conditions, obviously, with this type of work. Like, I don't work with acute conditions like flu or cough. Like, I do work with chronic deep patterns that people see. And also, like, since we have a hair sample analysis, we can definitely work from anywhere in the world, right? So I do have clients from all the continents, and people are finding me for all the different type of reasons, right? Some emotional, mental, physical conditions. And I think the offering is definitely to offer the multidimensional perspective, to offer understanding. Again, what is my field made of, right? What's participating, what's co-creating that condition, and understanding of the deeper metaphysical and all the way patterns that are actually making the certain condition alive. So I do that type of work. And also I do teach, and I have an institute where I teach other doctors like how to do this multidimensional medicine, how to navigate that, how to assess it, how to create, and how to actually help people from multidimensional perspective.
Thanks. Well, we really appreciate you in informing us about quantum medicine. And it's been a pleasure to connect with you today. And thank you for your time and all of that you shared.
Thank you so much. It's fun. Thank you.
Thanks for being a part of the Future of Wellness. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review. It helps us reach more people and to make great episodes like this one. Learn more about field dynamics and why we think the future of wellness matters. Check us out at energyfielddynamics.com. See you next time.